Hi, Eve. Are you here?
I'm here.
Hello. Are you ready to start? I'll go ahead and introduce you.
Sure.
Wonderful. I'm your fearless co-host tonight, and Howie is off teaching a retreat. So I'm so pleased that we have Eve Eckman here to guide us. Eve is a contemplative social scientist, writer, and teacher, um, supporting emotional awareness. And she draws from interdisciplinary skills and first person experiential knowledge from clinical social work, integrative medicine, contemplative science, and meditation. And Eve, maybe I don't know if you want to say anything else about what you do before you guide us in a meditation or whatever it is you're going to do. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really nice to be back. I think I've only been online with you all once before. Um, and it does make sense to give a little reason why Howie had the crazy idea to invite me. I feel so fortunate to be a teacher at the San Francisco Dharma Collective Wednesday nights, where I've been leading and co-leading a class the last 7 years, and we do various forms of book study. My background and lineage is mostly from Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana, and Dzogchen. And tonight we're going to be exploring together empathetic joy. There's never a bad time to explore empathetic joy, but I think right now there's a lot of great need for this practice. So I know how he kind of usually sets us right in. I feel so fortunate. I sat with Mission Dharma in person at the church maybe 7 years. Kind of barely missed a Tuesday. So I owe a lot to this Sangha. So thank you all for being here and supporting each other and supporting the teachings and the practice. I do hope, and I maybe should have asked before, but I would love to hear from folks. I think empathetic joy is a practice that's made more rich when we have a little bit of examples going into it. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, great. So I'll kick us off with just a little tiny bit of setting the stage. For many of you, it's just reconnecting with this old friend of empathetic joy. And then I would love to just hear a couple examples to help kind of um, exercise and open the heart, empathetic joy. And then we'll go into a practice, and I'll share some reflections and love to hear questions and reflections from you all as well. So one of the things about empathetic joy that is so special is of the practices to really build resilience in the heart, loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. This one is so explicitly allowing our heart to rest in others and to really kind of almost in a way find refuge in others. And this is tricky business sometimes, right? We can't always rely upon others as our source of well-being, because sometimes they come home in a bad mood or they have something else that's important, right? We can't just always expect another person to make us happy. But this practice of empathetic joy is it's a real rejoicing in the goodness and especially the virtues of others. These qualities that we admire, these qualities that kind of bring us a sense of admiration, awe, gratitude. I often think of these really as dharmic qualities. And some of these might seem really simple, but patience, right? Like someone who really exhibits this patience. I think of many of my friends who have young kids, and I'm in awe sometimes of the patience. Maybe some of you have that or have had that experience. Another and maybe simple but easy to relate to is generosity. When we really see the generosity of another being and kind of rejoice in that. Someone who's not just occasionally generous, but it almost seems as though they're committed to a life of generosity, one in which they're looking for opportunities to be of service and help out. Um, and that kind of way we can bring forth a rejoicing in generosity in others, really, it's such a key aspect of empathetic joy. One other virtue I'd like to share that we might not think about as much either is folks who really show and have a sense of inner contentment that's palpable. You know, we kind of rejoice in that sense that there is a sense of peace with themselves in the world as it is. This world that we are living in, many would argue, has always been this difficult. This is certainly a difficult time. And to see that kind of steadfastness that comes from a real deep set okayness within oneself, maybe an inner forging of these contemplative qualities that just rise up, you know, that they're just there. And we use empathetic joy or focus on empathetic joy. I sometimes think of it as, you know, a hawk that's out there at the edge of the cliff and it's getting those warm winds. And so it's floating on these warm winds and considering and reflecting upon the virtues of others. It's like we're floating on the warm winds of others. And I want to give us a moment to just think, you know, is there someone who easily comes to mind and we rejoice in their goodness? And of course, this person might not always be exhibiting these qualities, right? We are humans after all. So it doesn't have to be like this perfect person who we always think is exhibiting these qualities, but someone who really clearly is acting and engaging in the world in a way that just brings us delight. This could be someone we know. This could... Oops. I think maybe someone there needs to mute. I'll help you out. I think we could also think of someone on the world stage. You know, when we hear about the good deeds and acts of others, there's so many examples of people dedicating their lives to service and care, and we just see the goodness in the world, and it brings us joy. And to mention, I'll talk about this more after our practice. One of the interesting ways that empathetic joy is described when we look at the whole constellation of four immeasurables is as an antidote to jealousy and comparison, right? So when we would most likely feel like, oh, God, they got that promotion, or wow, I can't believe they're in a longer relationship than I am, right? Like this way of comparing ourselves to others. It's so natural, it's so human, right? Like that comparison is just kind of part of this social cohesion and disruption that is, you know, human society and culture. But I think when we're thinking that way, it's almost as though we believe there's a limit to happiness in the world. And if someone else has it, we won't. And so with empathetic joy, we just break apart that construct and we rejoice in the accomplishments and the goodness and the success of others. So with a little of that, you know, I'd really love to hear from one or two people, anyone specifically that comes to mind. And can you describe the qualities that bring you that sense of rejoicing? So I think, I don't know if you all raise your little hands here or if you want to put it in the chat, but it'd be great to hear a couple people. And I'll say that, oh, thank you so much, Victor. And as we listen to Victor, notice, what is it like to hear and receive empathetic joy from another? So even the act of sharing is an interesting part of our practice. Okay, Victor, do you want to start us off?
Hi, everyone. Good night. Good evening. As I heard you, I think I found it really challenging to find a person who embodies empathetic joy. And in my humble opinion, perhaps my personal approach about it would be to say maybe there are many moments of empathetic joy that many of us feel. And I think within that context, it may be easier to see it in others. And why not sometimes in yourself too? So I guess the only purpose for me commenting is just that I personally have an easier time thinking of moments when I have shown that capacity. And I also thought of people in history, names that we all have heard before, but I leave it like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. And I rejoice in the opportunity you're providing me to clarify what I was teaching on. So empathetic joy is what we feel to the goodness of others. It's not someone who's always joyful. It's someone in history, let's say, so I can rejoice in the goodness of Dr. Martin Luther King and just feel like, wow, he knew the risks he was taking and he still went out there and he still said what needed to be said. And the joy I feel is for that quality. And you're absolutely right. We can have empathetic joy many times for many people throughout the day. And we can rejoice in our goodness as well. Absolutely. I think part of course, many of the practices that are coming from Buddhism are helping us disentangle our self-obsession and our self-referentiality. So it's really nice when we extend this to others, but of course, for ourselves too. Thank you so much. Yes, Liz, I'd love to hear of someone who inspires.
Hi, your volume is much lower than everybody else's, so it doesn't match when we come on. We're louder than you are. Hi.
You're saying my volume?
Yeah, it's a little low.
Okay. I don't know quite.
I love sympathetic joy. I use it all the time if I'm jealous. I discovered sympathetic joy 20 years ago when I was working at UC Berkeley, which was a very difficult place to work. People were not kind to each other. And I made it my email address. My email address was mudita@berkeley.edu. So I did that on purpose to have sympathetic joy. I saw sympathetic joy coursing through the Berkeley email system. And that gave me a lot of joy and laughter. But I recently had a friend who was talking about how uncomfortable she felt about being jealous about someone. And I brought up sympathetic joy. It was a wonderful thing for her to have that as a tool for when she felt jealous to use sympathetic joy.
Wonderful.
So I use it a lot.
And Liz, my question is, who brings you empathetic joy? Can you give us an example? Tell us about someone. Tell us about someone.
Well, just if I'm jealous of someone, I stop. And then I go,
okay.
and I go and I take it on. I take on the feeling and the idea of sympathetic joy.
Yeah,
I can't do it. It's hard to do for someone I really dislike. I don't know that it would work. But if it's just someone I know that I like and is in my life and I'm feeling a sense of deprivation or it's for me, it's a great thing. And it works like that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and what I really appreciate that reflection, and I love that was right in your email address that you did that to remind yourself. Just to clarify, I'm really looking for folks who have examples of people, not just that they overcome jealousy, but they have a rejoicing in their goodness. So I'll take the next two hands with that. No problem. Yeah, we'll have the next two folks.
You can have a rejoicing that you found an antidote to jealousy. I am rejoicing.
Wonderful. Thanks, Liz. Yes, next up.
I'm Catherine. I'm not actually named Mission Dharma.
I didn't think so.
So the person that comes to mind immediately for me is Yo-Yo Ma, who's a cellist, a professional cellist, who has done just all kinds of incredible international collaborations with musicians from all these different traditions. I mean, several musicians. Rhiannon Giddens is another one, and just the generosity of giving that you feel when some of these people perform and speak with the audience on stage and work with children. And I just feel so much delight. And it makes me want to be more loving, more,
Wonderful.
more joyous.
Thank you, Catherine. Mary, love to hear from you.
Hi. Well, in a different kind of direction, but the first thing that really comes to my mind is my grandchildren. I think about, in fact, one time a local meditation teacher said to me, "Oh, when you even speak of them, you light up." And I think it's not just that they're my grandchildren, but there's something about little children that is so sort of innocent and pure, and they take so much joy in like very simple things, that is, I always feels kind of a lesson to us to be in the moment and kind of appreciate whatever's there kind of thing, very simple little things of life, and they just seem so sweet and innocent. It's almost like our Buddha nature,
I love that. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that example.
Thank you.
Yes, you're in the dark, so I can't see you lighting up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Nope,
don't have, there
problem.
we go. Sorry, I
Okay,
don't have
good.
a light from
No,
this
not needed.
source.
Not needed.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that you light up. I can imagine it.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. When I even think of them or look at their pictures or things, and especially, if I'm in person or on a video, it really is just, uh, there's really something so innocent and sweet about little children that brings us all to that place in ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Maureen.
Thank you, Eve. I always had an immediate response. I was feeling somewhat disappointed when I saw that Howie wasn't on tonight. And I thought, shall I listen or shall I not? And I was so happy. Your opening statement just made my heart sing. I just needed this so much. I'm so glad you're here, Eve. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wow. I received a rejoicing. I appreciate that, Maureen. Yes. Is that Eve also? Yeah. Oh, nice. Another Eve. Okay.
Yeah, another Eve. Well, right now, I also just want to say I really appreciate Mary saying what she said, because before I came on here, I was struggling with a little empathetic joy or sympathetic joy because I have my two kids refusing to eat dinner. So so that was a great reminder of all the joy they do bring on most of the time. But I was gonna say my mom probably came to mind just because she's demonstrated so much patience, such a hardiness for me, goodness, transformation. So yeah, I think that kind of was what struck me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's often when I lead this, I hear about people's parents a lot and grandparents, and just such a if we have the good fortune to have a relationship like that, how wonderful for that to be close in our life. I'll offer one more and we'll go into practice, which is I got to hear, some folks probably are familiar with Simone Biles, who's a gymnast, and I got to hear her speak on mental health a couple months ago. And it was so moving how this unbelievably physically talented human being, right, gold medalist, has also really dedicated herself to lifting up the issues of mental health and difficulty. She herself was a foster child, and just what it's like to come from difficulty and have that emotional weight and burden and live with that in your life. Even when you are a gold star Olympiad, you still have challenges and difficulties, and just really felt so much appreciation for her and a rejoicing in her. Oh, I hope you get a little flavor of this empathetic joy. Oh, great. And John added one in here. John says, I have a dear friend who listens and is sympathetic and positive and supportive. Comes to mind. Wonderful. Yeah. So I hope we're priming the pump here. And now let's just take a minute and find a posture that feels supportive. It's so important for our posture to reflect our practice. We could think of our posture as exhibiting the qualities of how our mind, heart, and body can be both at ease as well as upright and vivid. So finding a lengthened spine, almost the image of a stalk of a lily, very long and tall, but also supple and pliant. And softening all through the face, softening between the eyebrows and the forehead. Softening through the eyes. Softening the cheekbones and the jaw, and softening any need to use the face to communicate or receive, just letting that all go. And continue to invite this softening through the neck and the shoulders, the chest and the belly. For a couple breaths, inhale and feel the lengthening through the spine and inviting a quality of vividness with the inhale. And then with the exhale, softening, softening, softening. Allowing the attention and awareness to settle into the body. And allow the body to settle into its natural state. Stillness, stability. And of course, thoughts, memories, and images still arise. But we invite the inner speech to settle, moving towards silence. We invite this inner silence as a turning away from communicating, receiving from the world, as this intentional choice to rest in the natural state of silence. To do so, we can focus on the breath, noticing the subtle sensations of breath traveling in and out through the nostrils. As we find the sense of the body settled into a natural state of stillness and stability, and inviting the inner speech to settle into its natural state of silence. And consider settling the mind into a natural state of openness, clarity, spaciousness. Almost feeling as though we lean back in the mind. And as we lean back, there is spaciousness all around us. When we settle into these natural states of being, the body, speech, and mind, there's no need to be anything other than a breathing body. So when thoughts or images arise, we release them and let them return almost as though they are waves rising up and then returning back into the great ocean of awareness. And practice simply breathing, simply being. A bit of stabilization now in body, speech, and mind. We shift our attention and awareness to the mind and imagination. And we bring to mind someone who we can consider. This could be someone in history or someone we know, someone who's still with us or someone from the past. Someone who really exhibits the quality of generosity, kindness. And bring this person to mind and really imagine this quality and the goodness that it creates, how it makes us feel, how it likely makes many others feel. You could almost imagine as though you could see them smiling in front of you. Feel that warmth, that radiance of their kindness. And let it, as best it can, lift and gladden the heart. Breathing in, feel and imagine almost as though you are basking in this quality of kindness from this being. And breathing out, just feeling yourself extending that sense of gratitude and kindness. And just a couple more breaths with this being, really vividly, as much as possible, imagining them here, feeling that quality of their presence. And then inviting them to just move a bit to the side, maybe going to the right side. And shifting our attention and awareness now to considering someone who really exemplifies these qualities of patience, equanimity, a sense of peace and groundedness. This could be someone you know, or someone you've read about in history, someone you've seen even in the current news. And it's really demonstrating this ability to be with the difficulties, remain steadfast. And imagine them also here with that great quality of patience, equanimity, and feel and imagine what it's like to be in their presence. And in whatever way is available, let your heart lift, lighten, just with the knowing of this being, the goodness and calm they are able to exhibit and support you or many others. Couple more breaths, really feeling and drawing in the presence of this being. Then again, inviting them to move to the side, maybe over to the left, just outside of your current view. And shift the mind and attention and awareness to bringing to mind someone who really exhibits compassion. Someone who can really meet and be with the suffering and difficulty with such great care and love. There might be a number of beings who come to mind. Just choose one. And picture them right here with you. Feeling the goodness of being in the presence of a being of compassion. Let that warmth and radiance just flow through to you. And let the heart rejoice in the compassion. And then imagine bringing back the other two beings and considering these qualities together. The generosity and kindness, the peace and patience, and the compassion. And considering if these qualities also exist within you. Reflecting on times in which you've been able to express generosity and kindness. When in the face of difficulties, you've showed up with patience, steadfastness. And you found the inner resources to be compassionate right when it was needed. And feel and imagine a sense of rejoicing for these qualities within you. Very gently release any specific visualization or image and just come back to the body breathing. Notice in the body any residue or sensations of bringing forth empathetic joy. Maybe a warmth in the face or the chest or the belly. And just allow this field of empathetic joy to be present breath by breath. And without uprooting from this sense of whatever resonance of empathetic joy is present, gently start to become aware of the space around you. And feel a sense of presence of empathetic joy that's not just inside, but all around. Rejoicing in our home, rejoicing in the beings in our home, in the relative safety, beauty, and support. And before we come back to our shared space, feel a sense of rejoicing for the other beings gathered here this evening, also on their path, dedicating such precious time to reflect, be together. And then very gently wiggling fingers and toes, blinking eyes back open to our shared space. Thank you for your practice. Any questions or reflections on the practice? Anything you noticed? Anything you feel uncertain about? Can raise your hand or put in the chat. Madison, nice to see you, Madison.
Nice to see you, Eve. I just got back, so my practice was walking home as fast as I could for about 45 minutes, and that was the meditation. But there has been something that's been on my mind for a few months now, and that's after, I don't know, 11 years of studying with various teachers at Spirit Rock. I've always heard about change, 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 and it's the only thing that we can count on and all of that stuff. And I'm noticing massive amounts of change in the city, in my body, in my health, in things that I thought were going to be run a certain way that suddenly aren't. And I'm not finding myself super open after 11 or 12 years of practice to saying, oh, this is just a changing circumstance. So I wondered if you might have any reflections on, I guess, the acceptance of change or whatever you want to say about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Madison. Yeah. Wow, really could go on forever. You know, it is interesting. I think practice, as in meditation, can actually make us more aware of the impact of change. So there's a little paradox there, right? We meditate in order to help us develop and, kind of have skills or cope. And yet the sensitivity we're cultivating makes change more apparent. It's like we're kind of wide open. So there's that's happening. So we need not only the practice that's kind of developing that openness, we do need the kind of philosophical framework or attitude for it to change, right? It's really what is our view. And, as you said, many teachers talk about impermanence as, kind of, the the fundamental insight, right? Recognizing everything is changing. I think one thing I appreciate about that teaching that often gets missed out too, the impermanence, is it's really changing and we don't know. We don't know, right? There's such complexity and nuance with change. It can be very easy to get stuck in a small and narrow perspective from our point of view. We don't know where the change is going. And that kind of ruminative thinking of this is change and I don't like it, that second arrow of no, this isn't good. In some ways, I have this background in contemplative science, so I have studied in psychology, social psychology, and motion and neuroscience. And there's a way that you describe that how we manage the second arrow, this additional suffering on top of our pain. Like things are changing. That's painful. They shouldn't. Oh my God, that's so much more suffering, right? And managing that second arrow, there's a term of cognitive reappraisal, which is a fancy way of saying reframing, thinking about it in a new way. And when we meet the change, I think it can be really powerful, especially because a lot of these thoughts, and you described this medicine about change and things changing, they can start to become almost like gain momentum and accelerate. And so how do we kind of help, soften the darts of those thoughts? So we could take up something not like a mantra per se, but just like mantric speech, something very simple. Change is hard and I'm okay. Or change is hard and I'm here with it. Change is hard and I surrender and bow to what I can't understand. Whatever layer we want to go with it. And that may be something, as you said, that philosophically, yeah, I know that change is happening. I know impermanence is the only truth. How do we meet it on a moment to moment, thought to thought basis? And so I think applying this tool of cognitive reappraisal, and that means we're not trying to stop ourselves from thinking, this change stinks, right? I don't like it. But it's like, what's our next move? Do we continue that? And this option or opportunity is, here's change again, and welcome change. I'm here with you. This is hard for me, and I want to be tender with this. I do think learning how to bow ever lower to change is like the entire path. So you're onto it, Madison. Not like, oh, these 11 years are on nothing. Like you're onto the crux of what we need to learn and relearn literally every single thought. And that's where our mindfulness comes in handy, because we might not even notice that we're perseverating and ruminating and lost in these thought patterns about what we don't like and how we don't want it to be. And it's just, how can we meet it? I do think it can be also helpful to add just like that holding in the body of, this is hard and I'm okay, or this is hard and it will pass, or man, me and change. Like you can make it funny, like, you can swear at change. I don't like you and you're here, so I accept you. It's really the crux of it. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah. Yes, Mary. Oh, can't hear you. Oh, there you
Sorry,
go.
just to be a quick thing. I got a little delayed in traffic and missed the first 5 minutes, and somebody commented on your opening words. So I'm kind of curious. Would you mind just repeating your opening statement? Because I missed it.
I think, just we need empathetic joy now more than ever.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I'll say one more word on that, which is
True.
right now, according to a lot of statistics, certainly in North America, but globally, we live in a time of greater loneliness than we ever have.
Mhm, mhm.
Just a sense of disconnection and difficulty really being able to feel as though we resonate with others, even if we're around others personally. And some of that has to do with living in mediated environments, right? Technologically mediated environments. And so it's just really beautiful to let ourselves feel the warmth of rejoicing in others. And, it's interesting from a psychological and public health point of view, the solution to loneliness is be with other people. But from the dharmic point of view, right, from the contemplative point of view, it's create the inner conditions to feel like a deep presence of non-separateness and then go be with others. Because, as many of us know, you can spend a whole day with other people or a whole, relationship with someone and still feel lonely. And that could be the person you're with. Not here to give relationship advice, certainly, but you're also, like, where is it landing? What are we? There's a teacher, we've been reading his book in our Wednesday night class for a number of months, named Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And he talks about how many of us identify with our insecurity and anxiety, and he calls that the pain identity. And that when we host our experience from the pain identity, it's very hard to feel open, connected, and warm. And it's interesting. Our mind is so powerful. We really live within our perception, not with how reality is, but how we perceive it. And so if we're consistently retreading the story of I'm lonely, I don't get along with others, we're kind of reifying that pain identity. And the other way of being is, lifting the heart with loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy. That's, just such the perfect medicine at the inner level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, anyone else? I'm curious. What was it like to do that practice? Who came to mind and how did they visit you? Any reflections on the practice itself? I got a message from John Garland. Again, thank you, John. It was lovely to have other people who are examples of joy and service that I so enjoyed having here with me. Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? When we bring someone to mind, the joy that we feel, if that's possible, to really feel their presence, imagine their presence, it's real joy. It's not imaginary joy. Our body doesn't know the difference to, an imagined person who brings us delight and that person being there. It's such deep nourishment to be able to cultivate that right here in the moment. And, if we're far from those we love, bringing them joy, rejoicing in their goodness, sending them loving kindness. This is something we can be doing kind of all the time. And Pema Chodron talks a lot about doing these practices right on the spot, right in the moment. You don't need to wait for practice, especially with these practices for the heart, the four immeasurable practices. Other questions or comments? I know at least when I was sitting with Howie, he does compassion practices occasionally. I don't know how often he's offering empathetic joy. So just curious how this landed for people. Yes, David.
I was just going to say, there's someone in sort of my orbit who can be very generous. How would I say this? Very generous in terms of her second circle of people. But I would say in her inner circle, not always so generous. So it's just really interesting to see that and try to understand that.
Yeah.
The generosity, yeah, it just makes for some what's the word? It's a paradox among other things, but it's very
Yeah.
it can be very hard to be around when the world is perceiving a person in one way, but that may not be the way that they are with people they are closer with. So,
Hmm. Yeah. And did you bring this person to mind in your practice?
no, but as I've
Okay.
sort of been hearing people talk and you talk, um, it just sort of occurred to me, you know, but
Yeah.
maybe to that exact point, maybe I need to really sit with that a little
Yeah.
bit more, a little more consistently too.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We would never, in the same way that we don't want to force compassion when we're still feeling hurt or upset, like if someone has done harm to us and we are in the process of undoing our resentment, right? Because that's a real difficult stew to sit in when we're frustrated with someone or angry at someone or deeply hurt and just kind of, again, stuck in it all over and over and over, retracing it. Sometimes we want to apply compassion too fast. Like, may they be happy, maybe they be free, but it just feels like kind of dried up and tight. It's not. And the same with empathetic joy. We can't force it, and that's the funny thing. Like, I really appreciated earlier. I'm trying to see. I don't know if she's still here with us, but I think she was talking, about applying this whenever she felt jealous of someone. And sometimes we have to be really honest with ourselves. Like, sometimes we're not able to really apply it in an authentic way. We're like, oh, I'm so happy for you, right? But we're not actually feeling it, where it's like this kind of false, and actually the near enemy. Some of you may know when we talk about the four measurables, each of them has like a near enemy and a far enemy. So the far enemy, envy, actually, jealousy is a little bit different, but envy, I want what someone else has, that envious feeling. But the near enemy is this kind of pretending, or this kind of hypocrisy, like pretending that you actually want someone to be happy, but it's inauthentic.
Yeah.
So, and I think when we have someone in our life with just that, we all do, qualities that are hard for us and qualities that we appreciate. And it's funny, like we want to understand at a cognitive level what's going on. Very often that's just unsatisfying. So how do we practice, acceptance in an authentic way? And I think there are these three teachings from Shantideva that are really helpful about how do we work with someone we have difficulty with. And he says we have to keep in mind scope, meaning whatever it is, I'm having a difficulty with them around. In the scope of all things, it's probably not a huge deal. And then the second is complexity. For whatever reason, this person is able to be generous to others, but not to those who are close to them. Like, what's up with that? And just to recognize all the complex causes and conditions that go into that we may never know. Just recognizing complexity. And then the third, which I really love, he says, use any difficulty or kind of, conflict as a way to practice for future adversity, because it will come. So if I can learn to be with the difficulty of this being, this will probably help me. And I think about that. I won't name names, but I have a pretty difficult family member. And I often wish, God, I could just, can I just not ever have to interact again? But I know that that won't be true for the next difficult person in my life. Like, this one's been with me a long time, but there are constantly people in our life who show up who are difficult. And if we don't develop that skill of meeting the conflict, then, life's going to get harder and harder.
I was going to say, about 2 months ago, maybe I did a half day or all day sitting with Diane Winston on, sort of meta loving kindness. And I will say that it occurred to me after that if you're really able to do deep practice moment to moment, which none of us are, but when you have those moments, you can hold those relationships in a way that when we're feeling constricted that we can't. So it sort of reminded me like, well, it's always there. You may not be able to access it, but it is there in some way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah. Good luck with the ongoing practice.
Thank you.
Wonderful. If anyone else has a question, happy to take that. Otherwise, I'll share some other reflections on empathetic joy. Catherine, did you have a question? I saw your hand up for a moment. Or reflection?
I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit about the connection between Dana, gratitude, and mudita, and just how those connect.
Yeah, let's throw in devotion too. It's in that same wheelhouse. It's interesting again, in the kind of two lenses that I often operate through when we look at gratitude, really specifically. There's such a wonderful kind of body of research on gratitude and its benefits. And when we're looking at gratitude, there's a real specificity to it. Gratitude is not just, thanks, I appreciate you, or like, thanks for helping me out, thanks for helping me move, thanks for giving me a cup of coffee. There's actually, in the definition of it, a sense of reverence for what has been given. That's really distinct. It's recognizing that actually we can't exist without the help of others. Like, when we really get into the gratitude, we're actually getting into this beautiful reciprocity of life. Mm-hmm. And the author Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks a lot about especially indigenous approaches to relating in the natural world, she says that when we develop a sense of real gratitude, so not just thank you for these $7 raspberries that I bought in the supermarket, they're really expensive, but like, oh my God, earth and water and sun and a bush allow these beautiful, amazing, delicious, little berries to happen and be part of my day. Oh my God, that kind of gratitude actually creates the cycle of reciprocity where we then are interested in caring for what we feel has been given to us. So it's a really generous and virtuous cycle there. And I think, dana or generosity can be almost the flip side of gratitude. And we see even in psychological studies, when people are practicing gratitude journaling for 2 weeks, they're more likely to be generous towards others at a behavioral level. They're more likely to actually act kindly. So it's very powerful, the relationship there. So you said dana, gratitude, empathetic joy. Is that the third in there?
Well, I guess Dana.
Yeah,
Dana the same as gratitude?
Dana's really much more like offering. Right? Mm-hmm. Dana is like what we offer, and it's the paramita, it's one of our spiritual qualities that helps us along the path. It's the heart of generosity. But there's such a beautiful relationship, right? Gratitude begets generosity. And then our generosity can create gratitude in another. There's just a really virtuous cycle there. And empathetic joy is a bit more targeted, right? It's really about this rejoicing in the goodness of another. I do like to include it to the more than human world. Like I definitely, right now, I look out a window and I see the birds and the tree and I rejoice, in that sense with the natural world. I have gratitude for it, but that's interesting. It's a little different. Like I'm so grateful that tree is here and didn't blow down in the last storm. But I also rejoice in the treeness of the tree. Well, how wonderful, right? We rejoice in the quality of another. And then, I think I put in devotion because it's something I love to talk about. It's such an awkward subject for our modern meditation communities, which I understand. There's been a lot of harm in the past with blind devotion. But devotion is really when the heart opens and recognizes there is something so much greater. It's a real sense. It goes like gratitude is the gateway drug to devotion. Like our way in is when we start to feel deep gratitude, especially for example, the unbroken lineage of these teachings. How many, hundreds of thousands, millions of beings have offered these teachings and so that they could reach us in this time. To a teacher, of course, that can become problematic. But devotion is really meant, especially in the context of the Dharma, to be about the teachings and how they live through us, right? And sometimes we have devotion to the teacher who helps us see those teachings. But there's such a beauty in being able to place ourselves below. There's a humility in devotion that is not so common in our culture, but so deeply needed. And such a good sign for all of us on our spiritual path. If we start to feel that heart of humility, we're on the right track. So, thank you for the question, the excuse to talk about beautiful qualities. Okay, so yeah, there's an interesting kind of parallel to empathetic joy. Do you all take a break? We used to take a break in person, but online, no.
We usually don't.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I don't want to make anybody feel like they can't leave and go do what they need, but you're all at home, do what you need. There's another parallel to the word empathetic joy, which is the term elevation. Elevation was actually, created by a scientist named Jonathan Haidt, and he was really interested in looking at moral emotions. He started off looking, at the way that we feel rage and disgust towards others, and then he became more and more interested in what do we feel when we notice goodness, not what do we see when we notice reprehensible behavior. And he had this term of elevation, like lifting the spirits by seeing the goodness of others, and how it really helps us feel inspired and care more. And it's he's done these interesting studies where he'll compare a group of people watching something very inspiring, right? So watching a humanitarian project or excuse me, someone in the world who's doing great good. And then he has people watch a video that's just funny, like, a cat video. And in both cases, people are cultivating positive emotion. They're feeling good. But it's so much deeper in terms of what people report in terms of inspiration and desire to help others when they're really focusing on that sense of empathetic joy or elevation, as you would call it. And I think it's really interesting to look at how empathetic joy weaves into our feelings of despair and overwhelm. You know, there's empathetic joy, and then there's empathetic distress. And we live in great times of empathetic distress. There's a lot to be distressed about. And empathetic distress, it operates on a kind of similar way. With empathetic joy, we're resonating, we're recognizing what's happening, and we're resonating with this kind of rejoicing. With empathy in general, it actually has a couple different components. With empathy, we recognize, right? So we resonate to what's happening. And then we have a bit of a perspective or an appraisal of what's happening. So with our empathy, maybe we open the news and we hear about yet another incident that is distressing or heartbreaking for us. And we immediately have this sense of overwhelm or despair. And that's one way that empathy can go. And when we experience that sense of overwhelm and despair, very often it's, I can't handle it. It's too much for me. And in a funny way, it's self-centered, right? That despair. We know that when we're experiencing empathetic distress, we're not actually available to the suffering of others. So there we are, like caring about the suffering of others, but then we kind of collapse inward. Our own suffering makes us unavailable to the very suffering we're caring about. It's a difficult situation that we get in with that empathetic distress. When I spent time working as a frontline social worker at SF General Hospital, I would really notice the difference of my colleagues of, their empathetic distress. When it was a patient who was coming in, especially a young person who was critically injured and maybe wasn't going to survive. Very hard for many of our nurses and physicians and technicians. They had this, oh my gosh, it's I can't, it's too much. And sometimes that's because we over-identify, with that could be my kid, could be my grandkid, could be right that. So it's really interesting for us to investigate the source of our distress. Another big piece of our distress and despair is the feeling as though we can't do anything. Like there's nothing possible for us to support. Like we're just taking in and there's no capacity. I spent a number of years training after I left the ER and went back to school and then came back and started training in compassion for these healthcare providers. And to really start believing, it's a little bit of a leap of faith, that compassion is something we can do. So in the face of distress, really having that sense of, I really deeply care about the distress that's happening. I wish this person could be free from suffering. I wish they could know ease. I wish they could know peace. And to let that feel, as an action we can do. And of course, that wish won't heal the patient in the moment, but it allows our heart to stay open instead of that turning away and shutting down. So we can think of applying this compassion to our heart when we're feeling that sense of overwhelm and despair. And it's a really, beautiful way of applying compassion. We can do it even before we open the news. It's like get the heart primed open with that compassion. We can do this, of course, in the context of being with difficult people. We know we're going to encounter someone who we have a really hard time with. We practice a little compassion even before we enter so that distress doesn't become overwhelming for us. And I also want to, bring up there's another kind of empathic distress that can occur. There's the despair and the overwhelm. There's also the blame and aversion. There's a way that we see and witness the suffering of others. And instead of kind of that, I can't, it's too much, we're like, nope, not mine. That's their problem. They got to deal with that. Similarly, we're unavailable to the suffering, right? In this case, the judgment isn't about, it's too much for us. The judgment is that person is undeserving of my care. It's really quite common. I think if we can really be honest with ourselves right? That sense of I just can't, or that's not my fault, or no, well, those people are doing that, so it's kind of theirs, it's kind of their responsibility or their fault. Again, back to my days in the ER, certainly when people would come in like frequently and they would let's say have an ongoing mental health issue or substance use issue, there was, sometimes the distress, the empathic distress wasn't there, but it was this sense of, oh, that's their problem. They're not getting the help they need. I can't help, let's do the limited amount we can do for this person. And in the case of, a lot of the issues in our contemporary times, we can open the news and I just can't. That's too much. Those people are wrong. Those people are bad. Just this judgment. And it brings up, an emotion I really think is important for us to deeply understand in these times and always, which is an emotion of contempt, a sense of being superior to others. It's different than being angry. We're actually looking down. When we're angry with someone, they're right here. When we're contemptuous with someone, they're below. We're looking down on them. And that sense of contempt, like I know better, it blocks compassion and empathy. I think, unfortunately, a lot of our contemporary media and social media are set up for contempt. Set up for contempt. And a difficulty about contempt, especially in the context of social media, sometimes we like feeling contempt. Kind of enjoyable in the moment, right? We're kind of upping ourselves and putting down another. And there's a way in which that has a sense of satisfaction. It can be really difficult to address and assess. How do we meet this feeling of superiority in a way that's more open? And again, it really is compassion, right? So in this case, applying compassion to the difficulty that we're seeing. And instead of the judgment, just, again, may they be more free. May they be at ease. So we have this empathic distress that leads to despair and overwhelm, empathic distress that could lead to aversion and blame, and then empathic distress that leads to compassion. That's where we're aiming. That's really the only sane solution, the only sustainable solution for us. So I'd love to lead us in another practice, but before I do so, are there any questions about this, about not only empathetic joy, but empathetic distress? How to be with these difficulties? Either I've lost you all or I'm so clear. Let's hope for the latter. Can people think of an example in themselves, because that will be part of our practice, of when your distress leads to aversion or overwhelm? It's going to be important. Yes, David. Oops, you're muted.
I was just going to say that, part of this either contempt or empathetic distress or whatever in the world of social media and just the media world. I mean, part of it, I think, though, is drawing where you're willing to set your boundaries. Because if you set your boundaries sort of too wide and you're open to it, to all of it, you're kind of left in a reactive mode, and sort of there's, at least to my mind, kind of a loss of control. And if you're clear about what your boundaries are, at least you can be, maintain your balance or decide what you are or are not going to do about the state of the world. So, and I guess that's very subjective and personal. I mean, I think it's different for everybody, but I do in this time that if we don't, certainly for myself, if I don't set pretty clear boundaries about how much of this I'm going to expose myself to each day, I'll kind of go crazy.
Yes, you were describing discernment and wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is really for the kind of that which we can't keep out, right? I think there's a place, for very compassionate and clear boundaries of our mental and heart space, right? Things are not going to just get better in a week or two, right? So how do we keep up this marathon of being exposed to difficulty? And I think you're exactly right. We have to be using introspection and like, where is my healthy intake? But it's also not healthy to push everything out because we live in this world. We are of this world. And so finding that for ourselves. And I do think it can be so powerful to use our news consumption and social media consumption as compassion practice.
Hmm.
It's a really, just an interesting and different way that I think can be very powerful. And, check in with yourself. Like I really, I notice for myself, I try to check in with my body before I engage in news, and then check in with my body after, and really, okay, wow, what did that just do for me, or what did that take away from me? And then noticing if we can apply compassion as we do it. Can we have that nourishment of the practice with us? Thank you. Victor, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, it's a comment. I just want to thank you for a solution to a situation that I have. Essentially, I experienced a series of negative moments with a close family member, and I was using David's approach, which is, okay, I need to set a boundary so that this family member understands that my limits. But as I was listening to you, I think the first thing is thank you, because I think the immediate reaction is avoidance. You want to avoid that person. So you can go from setting a boundary to inadvertently avoid the person potentially.
Yeah.
And I think what you said is very important, which is to have patience towards the other person and compassion before you engage with them, so that when you see them, you have a relatively pleasant experience, or perhaps a pleasant experience. I don't know. I mean, only time will tell how my experiences went. But I think there's also, as I was listening to you, there is a delicate balance between having compassion and unconsciously feeling superior and looking at the other person with contempt.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Victor. Yeah. And, our compassion falls into pity when we look down upon the other with their stuff, like, oh, too bad for them suffering. So you really picked up on that. And, just to say, because it brings me such inspiration, we are all practicing, this kind of relative compassion. We're doing our very best to kind of meet, the challenges and the difficulties and the suffering that is in our life. And then we respond with compassion. But there's an ultimate level of compassion. And at that ultimate level of compassion, we don't need boundaries, because our compassion is just a pure field within us. And it's how we see the world, it's how we respond to the world. It's our stance with the world. I've had the good fortune to meet a couple accomplished practitioners where I felt that they just were beings of compassion. And to see them, as difficulties arise. And it's just such an inspiration to think I think we can all get closer. This famous story from the Dalai Lama when one of his main teachers who, escaped Tibet right after him, but then was held in a Chinese prison for 30 years. And in that time, he was tortured and, it was difficult. And when the first reunion with the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama says, well, you must have been so scared, it must have been so hard. He said, oh, it was so hard. I almost lost my compassion. And you're like, like that level, right? It's inspiring. And we should not put ourselves there, but on a good day, a lot of rest and all the nutrition, and we've practiced a lot, we can kind of meet the difficulties like from compassion, not respond. So anyway, just as an inspiration. Yeah. Thank you. John.
I don't know if you have too much time left, but I was thinking about
No
Gregory
problem.
Boyle. Gregory Boyle was recently talking about this real power of being in a situation to be changed. We are here in this exposure to be changed as opposed to do something was one thing he talked about. And he talked about the deep healing of this acceptance at a really deep level. This, I love you at a level that you can't get beyond. I have passion for you at an incredibly deep level, and it changes gang members, and he sees it and all that in Southern California. It was a real powerful story, and it makes the other question I had to do with a little more clarification on devotion, but I don't know you're going to be able to get to all that. But
sorry, not this time.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think a beautiful way for us to close. I see. Thank you so much, Catherine, for putting in the chat the upcoming announcements, and we can dedicate our merit here together, and that's really just this most compassionate act of being able to offer up the goodness, and to really have that clear intention of bodhicitta, or an awakened heart for the sake of all beings. So this is a practice that we can do tonight, but it's also, of course, a practice we can dedicate, any of our efforts for all beings. I'll be teaching tomorrow night in person and online at the Dharma Collective, and most Wednesdays. You are all welcome anytime. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure to be with you all. So let's take a moment, and if it feels comfortable, as a symbolic gesture of offering, putting the hands at the chest in front of the heart. And taking a moment, reconnecting with the body, the breath. And connecting to the heart of compassion, the heart that quivers in the face of suffering. And feeling the capacity of that heart, the strength of that heart. We are here because of the compassion of others. We are here to offer compassion to others. And so we dedicate the energy of our practice here together, and the heartfelt aspiration that could radiate out in great waves, and all beings could know their true nature. All beings could know peace and ease. All beings could be safe and healthy. May all beings be free. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you. Have a beautiful evening.
Thank you so much, Eve. And I just want everyone to know that the information about how to offer dana, should you be so moved, is in the chat. And thanks in advance for your generosity in supporting the Sangha, supporting the teachers. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks again for being here for us and with us, Eve.
My pleasure.
Eve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Eve.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you, Kath.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thank you. Yes.
Night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mission Dharma.